Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pro AV today. You know, one of the cool things about being in the AV community is that we're really part of the technology community at large. And whether you think Silicon Valley, whether you think SaaS, whether you think Austin, Texas, there's a lot of different places that you say the word technology and your mind goes. And I wanted to spend some time today really spotlighting a group of people that really are elevating where our technology community is going, especially when it comes to new ideas, representation, DEI, things like that. And that is the women in technology. And I realized that I don't have a lot of the answers for that. So I brought on somebody who has a lot more of those answers than I do. And that's Nancy Wang, founder over from AWIT and current GM for the data security division of AWS. Nancy, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Of course. Thanks so much, Ben, for having me.
Look, Nancy, first of all, I've got to say your titles, you've got so many. It's hard. Like I had to cut the list down. It's incredible. So, with that said, I would love to hear just some more of your story, how you got into technology and really what inspired you to help found AWIT.
Sure. So actually, you alluded to that quite well, Ben, by pointing out the many hats that I wear. And that really boils down to, I think fundamentally, I'm a very curious person. I like to know how things work. I like to take things apart. And that's really where the technology or engineering foundation in my childhood came from, which is started fixing cars with my dad, started building model airplanes, and started competing model airplanes in high school. And eventually that took me into a career where you can build things, and especially with software, you can build, countless number of things, especially now with generative AI, right? It's really opened the possibilities of what you can build with non-hardware or non-linear forms, right? So that part is really, really exciting. And I think on the topic of path, right? I often talk about path to various communities, whether it's women in tech, LGBT, Black, Hispanic folks in tech, because coming from a person of color myself, right, and I also had a I would say, traditional background growing up in rural Wisconsin. So also from the middle of the country, like yourself, Ben, which is there's not really sort of this linear idea of you get from point A to point B every number of years, right? You move up one step function and it's always up and up. In fact, if you had to characterize my career, it's probably been a few spirals, been a few zigzags, and here I am. So I actually started out my career working for the federal government, building healthdata.gov, which for me, that really sparked the passion of being able to solve problems with large-scale data sets, right? And using data to inform better decisions, especially decisions that impact people. So one of the reasons I got invited and really passionate about building the healthdata.gov platform with then Todd Park, who himself is an amazing entrepreneur. He built Athena Health and is part of the Obama administration back in 2011, is how do you actually build healthcare or combine healthcare data sets that can help, for example, hospitals determine, how many hospital beds you need, right, during various epidemics, like the one that, we just emerged out of, right? Or how do you, for example, introduce new medical students out in the community such that the access to primary care or OBGYN care is equitable, right, across different areas of the country. So that really sparked the journey of finding out answers with data and using data to drive business decisions, which then, of course, led to Google, where we brought gigabit internet actually into various cities. So I've been through Austin. In fact, I even have driven a ditch witch through Kansas City, which is one of our first cities for Google Fiber. And again, really that story around driving impact with technology. And so then that led, of course, down to data protection, working at Rubrik, and now, of course, at AWS, where my team is responsible for protecting and securing the data that lands on disk in the cloud. Right. So then you might ask, how does that translate into AWIT? Right. So AWIT is really about, my passion and the ability to bring a community together to solve a very targeted problem, which is, if you look around, right, in fact, a recent McKinsey report says this: for every one woman, promoted into director plus levels, you have 2 stepping down, right? That's not great. That means you're not even sort of maintaining status quo. You are taking steps backward, right? And that results in, for example, lack of role models, lack of people who've forged that path, who can tell you, hey, do this, but don't do that, right? And so every time it's almost like recreating the wheel. And that's the problem that AWIT is uniquely positioned to solve because, I live and breathe that, right, every single day. And through the position and the platform that I have, I also have the ability to bring other women along the journey with me so that they also become flywheel effects, right, in their own right, and generating this positive series of returns, right, for the community where, let's say by 2050, our goal is really for this problem to not even exist as a problem, and we can move on to second order problems. But just want to share a little bit of my personal background and also where the inspiration and inception for AWIT came to be.
Well, it's really, really helpful, right? I mean, you talk obviously about the renewal rate and two people stepping down for every person that steps up. We'll kind of start there, right? When you think about both on the entry level and advancement opportunities, what are some of the common barriers that you see women maybe uniquely face that we might not face as guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll bring up an anecdote from one common process in job hunting, which is salary negotiation. Right? You've gone through all the hard work of applying for that job, whether it's applying, sending your resume, or being more involved. Sometimes companies also have written exercises. AWS does, and I know for certain positions at Google and various startups that I've interviewed for or been on the other side of the interviewing table, typically is a part of the interviewing process, right? So you've put in, at this point, many, many hours in securing the job that you really want, right? You've gone in, you've gotten the offer. Now it's time to make sure that you are rightfully, right, and equitably compensated for the job that you're about to do, which could be long hours, weekends, nights, whatever, right? And it's often at that stage where I actually find myself coaching some of the women who come through my way in various positions that I've been in the tech industry, being like, you need to negotiate with me. Hint, hint, you should be negotiating with me. And just statistically, right, that is not something that I've had to do with male candidates as often. And of course, actually, if you take, for example, some of the inspiration behind this company based out of Seattle called Textio, right, which is looking at job descriptions, looking at resumes, and really picking out biased, words that could be, for example, start bias or could, for example, prevent certain subgroups from applying to roles. That's correlated, right? In the sense that I'm sure you've heard, right? Women don't often apply to positions that they don't feel 100% or usually more qualified for. When, for example, I have had many early career, I just put software engineers walk into my office and be, well, when can I be a director of software engineering? It's like, hold your horses. I love the ambition, but there are some steps that you need to fulfill beforehand, right? Before we can have that conversation, right? And that's, again, part of so for example, on my own team at AWS, right, we have a women at subgroup. And oftentimes, we come together and put together a list of topics that would help benefit the women in the organization, such as, for example, how to advocate for yourself, right? How to continuously build I call it actually your continual promotion document, because promotion documents shouldn't actually be snapshots in time, right? Where it can be disjointed. You might be working on a project from 3 years ago that grew significant skills, but maybe it's been a long time, right? You don't exactly remember what you did or what the impact was. So that's something I have for all of my directs and my staff, which is they have a continuous promotion document where what they do through time, right? It's really that kind of running window. Everything is documented. Everything has a why they did something, what they did, and also later on, how did they measure success and eventual impact?
Well, look, you talked a lot about some of the great things you guys are doing at AWIT from a training skill set perspective. With that lens kind of in mind, what are some of the skills you mentioned negotiating, obviously, what are some of the skills that you're seeing demand for in tech industry specifically?
Absolutely. So let's just take a look at the numbers, for example. So we as an organization have put our upskilling courses. And in fact, speaking of macro trends that you can't really change, but actually might lead you down a better path is, for example, when the pandemic hit in 2020, AWIT used to host large-scale workshops or conferences in various tech hubs or cities across the US and also across the world as well. In San Francisco, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. We also had events in Austin, Texas as well. Berlin, Paris, list goes on and on. But of course, with the pandemic, no one was hosting those large scale in-person events where you could probably spread disease, right? With that said, the path that we eventually took was, well, we don't want to stop our mission, right? Of reaching more women out there in the community, upskilling those women, right? Despite the pandemic, people still have a living, right? People still want to advance in their careers. So the path that we decided to take was, well, how can we actually put this onto a global platform whereby the platform and us, right? 1+1 = 3 can reach more people around the world where we may not have in-person presence. And that's actually one of the best decisions that we've made to date, because I can tell you, Ben, right? Since we put those courses on Coursera as of 2020 was the launch of our first specialization, real world product management. All of these, by the way, for listeners can be found on www.coursera.org/AWIT. So that was our first specialization. And to date, there has been over 30,000 enrollees, right? So you think about how many in-person events you need to hold to reach that number, right? And that's the beauty of the internet. That's the beauty of digitalization, right? Putting content out there and democratizing access to that content. And, we didn't stop there. 2021 saw the launch of our second specialization, which is for folks who are interested in upskilling themselves in cloud technologies and becoming eligible, right, to take the exam to become cloud practitioner certified, which is an AWS certification that is very much recognized in the industry and actually makes one more competitive in the job search if you're looking for a technical cloud role. And most recently, in the last March, so not quite 2 months yet, in the last month, we've also launched our third specialization, which is real world engineering management. And that is really important because that's really the true vision of the T in AWIT, which is all technical roles, right? All roles that require technical knowledge, technical expertise. And that's really what we're focused on. And what I can share, since in this conversation, is that we're now working on our fourth specialization around security, right? And these are all areas where we do see women and underrepresented groups, frankly, being less represented than other, contingents, right? And by upskilling folks and providing access to content in a very cost-effective manner and an easy to access, really self-paced way, we have been able to, based on our testimonials we see online, out of the 30,000 plus enrollees, we've seen hundreds of new job offers, promotions, for example, people landing their dream role within AWS, for example, because we cover interviewing, right? The correct answers, how to think about interview questions, also as part of this specialization.
Nancy, I love that you bring up the certification realm of technology, right? Maybe uniquely, the technology industry is so heavily focused and so heavily impacted by certifications, whether it's platform specific, whether it's skill set specific, things like that. But I want to step back even further than that for a second and talk about more on the recruiting and kind of job awareness side, right? One of the things that we've struggled with as an applied technology community is really letting people know that these careers exist, right? And a lot of times it's because we're failing people in college, we're failing people in high school. What are some of the ways that as a technology community, we can do a better job on the front end of even recruiting and driving awareness for these careers?
Absolutely, which is why, AWIT works with great partner organizations such as Girls in Tech, Girls Who Code, because you're right? It is again, applying my analytical brain to this challenge, it's a top of funnel problem, right? And so if you're able to drive traffic to top of funnel, and these are making sure that, you have the right cohorts studying STEM, which, not to drive a tangent, but because that's also why I'm on the board of directors for Penn Engineering Online, which is a very, I would say, focused initiative from Penn School of Engineering on how do we provide more quality, Ivy League education online. And that's why Penn is one of the, actually, I believe the only Ivy League institution to have our Masters of Computer Information Technology degree, the full degree, on Coursera, right? So that's part of the effort, and frankly, my personal philosophy around making education accessible, right? So that's really your top of funnel. Now, with that said, AWIT does focus, I would say it's a middle of funnel problem where, those folks have the right degrees, they have the right background and training, they're entering the workforce, but it's really capturing that middle funnel sort of population where they've been in the workforce now for, maybe 5 to 10 years, depending on, again, different individuals. And they're now reaching the senior product manager, the senior engineering levels. But they're maybe looking at their first people manager job or even their first manager of managers. And I'll tell you, Ben, when I became first a manager of managers, where I was no longer managing individuals, right? It was a big mindset change. And no one really tells you, hey, here's a handbook, read these 5 pages and you'll know what to do. It's been a lot of trial and error, and I'll say a lot of error as well on my part, right? And that's how you learn. But look, if I can pay it forward to other people in the community and help them prevent making some of the errors that I myself made and learned the hard way, I consider that success, right? Is helping other people get to where I am 5, 10 years earlier, right, in their career.
Well, Nancy, look, I feel like there's a million different questions that I could ask, especially right now amidst maybe some of the layoffs and organizational changes and things like that. I'll save that probably for another episode. It's a tease. We got to get you back on. But really, to land the plane here, how can women get involved on both the executive and leadership side, but also plugged in at more of the top of funnel with AWIT?
Absolutely. Great question, Ben. I would say for women looking to upskill themselves and continuously learn some of the newest tech trends out there, we try to keep all of our courses up to date with the latest examples and case studies. Check us out at www.coursera.org/AWIT or our homepage at www.advancingwomenintech.org. And for executives who want to give back, please reach out to me. I read and answer all questions, daily, and that's a great way, for example, to form executive or what we call ambassador communities. So whether it's hosting small group mentoring circles, giving a workshop or a masterclass, for example, on something that you're really passionate about, that you believe can help others, there's so many ways to get involved, and also with organizations in addition to AWIT as well. But I think the fact I'm trying to say is get out there, right, and actionalize on helping other people advance in their careers.
Nancy, look, I appreciate the time today. We 100% have to have you back on. Really, the voice that you have in the community is unparalleled. And personally, thanks from me for really all that you do for the community, really help everybody that might feel underrepresented, transparently from guys like me who sometimes might, accidentally not say or do the right things. I'm so grateful for your leadership and really an example for someone like me to follow. But until next time, Nancy, we appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Well, Ben, awareness is the first step. And I think you're doing absolutely the right thing by seeking out voices like mine. And I'm happy to provide a list of other voices as well that, can help provide guidance in this area.
Well, look, I'm going to take you up on that. And if you want to take her up on that as well, I'll put a link to some of that contact information and some of those people you can reach out to below underneath the episode. But until then, we appreciate you so much for joining us today on Pro AV Today. Make sure you tune in next time.